The moon has baffled generations for centuries, not revealing its secrets until we finally had the technological prowess to unlock them. However, it seems there are still some theories knocking around about what the moon is, how it was made, and where it came from, and they truly are fascinating. Hello all and welcome along to another episode of Tinfoil Tuesday with me, Simon Dan. Thank you very much for joining me. So today's video features a channel called Universe Inside You, which has amassed a whopping 1.6 million subscribers. I'm slightly concerned though, because some of its content is, well, let's just dive into today's video and you'll see what I mean.
In the 1960s, NASA compiled a list of strange sightings on the moon as seen by reputable astronomers going back to the dawn of the telescope, called a chronological catalog of lunar events. The report reveals hundreds of strange objects moving on the surface, with odd lights seen in the dark of the moon, and even clouds and mists streaming across its exterior.
What this video doesn't explain here is that this catalogue goes from the 1500s to about 1960. Pretty much all of those entries can be explained today. For example, there's one in 1960 which just says red colour, which we know is caused by the refraction of the sun's light through the Earth's atmosphere.
Our nearest neighbor in space, the moon, has long baffled scientists. When considered, it is truly one of the more enigmatic members of our solar system. These oddities include the fact that the moon and the Earth are the largest planet-moon system in the solar system, the moon being about 1/4 the size of the Earth.
And this is absolutely true. Earth's moon is by far the largest in the solar system in comparison to its parent planet.
The moon has an odd orbit, which means that the same side of the moon is always facing Earth.
Not really that odd. All the major moons of Jupiter and Saturn are tidally locked, and Pluto and its moon Charon are tidally locked together, which mean they're facing each other continually, for eternity.
3 feet per second, 40 feet.
No one but the astronauts have actually ever seen the far side of the moon with their own eyes.
Okay, fine, but we can all see it if we want to. This picture here was taken by the Discover spacecraft.
It also, interestingly enough, has a tidal lock with the Earth. The moon orbits the Earth and it always faces the Earth the same way. Now, you may not have thought about this before, but what's one of the interesting things that happens with that? You could always do things on the back side of the moon. You could do very elaborate construction projects. You could have very bright things going on. All these bright buildings, highways, roads. It could look like Manhattan. There could be all these ships coming and going, and you would never see it because you only see one side facing the Earth.
Doesn't look like a lot going on to me.
Perhaps one of the oddest coincidences is the strange fact that the moon and the sun, from the perspective of the Earth, appear to be the same size. That's because the moon is 1/400th the size of the sun, and is exactly 1/400th the distance between the Earth and the sun. This is what gives us solar eclipses, where we can see this incredible coincidence for ourselves.
Cosmic coincidences are a wonderful thing, aren't they? Just appreciate the fact that we're lucky enough to be around during times like this.
Not only does it rotate in such a way as to always keep one face to the Earth, which is unusual enough.
Except it's not. By the way, this is David Childress, an author who investigates unexplained mysteries and interesting phenomena.
But possibly explained. But even stranger still is that when the moon eclipses the disk of the sun and transits it, it's a perfect eclipse. Our moon is of such a size and distance from the Earth that during an eclipse, the disk of the moon is transiting the disk of the sun. And during the complete eclipse, the moon disk is perfectly, not more and not less, covering the disk of our sun.
Our survey said...
Apart from the time when we get an annular eclipse, then the moon appears too small to cover the sun, so it isn't exactly all of the time. In fact, of all the eclipses of the sun from the year 2000 to right now, 36% of those have been annular eclipses, and only 31% of those total eclipses. So the annular eclipse is actually the slightly more common occurrence.
Now that our moon is arbitrarily in that orbit to not more or not less eclipse the sun, but to perfectly eclipse the sun,
31% of the time.
would suggest that our moon is actually in an artificial orbit around our planet. Because to just capture some moon or even that it would just form, as the planet forms, in that orbit and that size, the odds are a zillion to 1.
Well, they did a pretty bad job then, didn't they? 31% success rate. Doesn't seem great to me.
There are some very strange anomalies about the moon's orbit that are undeniable.
But probably thoroughly explainable.
And one of them is that the apparent diameter of the moon and the apparent diameter of our sun from Earth is almost precisely the same.
Oh, bloody hell. Except when it's not.
And you might say, well, that's not a big deal, but the interesting point is that it causes this corona phenomenon to occur when we have a total solar eclipse. You see this perfect ring of light around the moon. Now, what are the likelihoods that that could be strictly a function of chance? It seems very, very small.
But the corona is there whether we see it or not. It just so happens that 31% of the time, when the moon covers the sun, it gives us a scenario where we can see that corona.
The moon, I believe, is tidal locked in orbit, which, by the way, is very rare in our solar system, number one.
Yes, really rare. Mercury, the moon, Phobos, Deimos, Metis, Adrastea, Amalthea, Thebe, Io, Ganymede, Europa, Callisto, Pan, Atlas, Prometheus, Epimetheus, Janus, Mimas, Enceladus, Telesto, Tethys, Calypso, Dion, Rhea, Titan, Iapetus, Miranda, Ariel, Umbriel, Titania, Oberon, Proteus, Triton, Charon, and Pluto. But yes, really rare.
Proves to me intelligent placement. And I think for two reasons. The first reason being, in order to sustain life on this planet in a way that makes it extremely comfortable for sentient beings like ourselves, you need to have a stabilizer to keep the Earth from rocking on its axis, number one, because you would have severe storms, severe wind gusts in different places, tides would run up into the land and destroy property and so forth.
Well, there is an argument that life wouldn't be as we know it, or even exist, if the moon wasn't there, so I'll give him that one. This is Billy Carson, by the way, author and presenter of a show about the secret space program.
The moon actually really balances out the Earth's weather and everything else. A lot of people don't know that. The second, I think, and most important reason is because when you're tidally locked, what happens is the moon, from our perspective on Earth, you only see one side of the face and it rotates at the same speed as Earth is rotating, so we only get to see that same side.
No, that is not why the moon is tidally locked. If it rotated at the same speed the Earth rotates, then it would be rotating every 24 hours and we would be seeing all sorts of sides of the moon. It's tidally locked because it rotates in the same amount of time it takes to orbit Earth, roughly 27 days. If you're getting crucial yet basic facts about this incorrect, then I really worry about what else you're going to say.
So what it allows is for clandestine operations on what they call the dark side of the moon, which really is not dark. We call it dark because it's on the far side that we can't see, but technically, because the moon has its own rotation on its own axis, all sides of the moon actually see the sun. So there really is no dark side of the moon, but the far side of the moon is where potentially there is clandestine operations, maybe even ancient bases, maybe even now current bases there that are now kept away from human eyes here on Earth.
Yes, positively bustling over there, isn't it?
The moon and the Earth are a weird system because they're so close in size. And so it's really rare for a body as small as the Earth, with as minimal a gravitational field as it has, to be able to actually lock a body like that into a tidal lock arrangement. It's very easy for Saturn and Jupiter, which are much more massive, to be able to maybe grab an object or even fission off a moon and keep it in a tidal locked relationship.
Mike Barra, actor and author. So this guy knows that other moons are tidally locked as well. Why isn't he talking to the other two guys?
So I wonder when I see that if maybe it wasn't moved in place and the Earth actually sort of robbed it of its spin momentum at some point, to the point that it now shows only one side of itself to the Earth. But it doesn't seem like an arrangement that could have come about naturally. It just doesn't really add up.
So what are the alternatives then? A giant hand put it in place, or perhaps a giant species?
Scientists cannot agree on the origins of the moon. There are several theories, but none of them adequately explains everything concerning the moon.
Incorrect. Whilst it is still a theory, the giant impact hypothesis, which states that a planet the size of Mars struck the Earth and the debris that was thrown up formed the moon over millions of years, does get a lot correct.
The first is the fission theory, which says that a chunk of the Earth broke off and condensed into the moon. The problem with this theory is that it does not explain the 4,000-degree baking that the moon's surface endured at some point in its past.
Which the giant impact hypothesis does.
If the moon had formed nearby the Earth, then our planet would have gone through this baking heat also, but there's no evidence for this on Earth. The second theory is the capture theory, in which the Earth somehow captured the moon as it was whizzing by. The problem with this theory is that it's unlikely, because it would have had to happen in a very exact way. Otherwise, the moon would have crashed into the Earth.
Yes, for an object the size of the Earth to capture an object the size of the moon would be extremely difficult.
The third theory is the condensation theory, that says the Earth and the moon condensed at the same time from material in the solar system. The problem with this theory is that if it were true, the moon would be as dense as the Earth.
That's not actually correct because of the way that planets form. All of the heaviest materials during a planet's formation sink to the centre of that planet. And they do actually have similar sized cores based on their relative sizes. So this theory does have some credence.
The fourth and most recent theory is that a planet like Mars crashed into the Earth, breaking off a chunk, which then reformed into the moon. The problem here is that the isotopes for the Earth and the moon are identical. This would not be the case if a planet had crashed into the Earth.
You can't just say isotopes. They are referring to here about the oxygen isotopes found in the Earth's and the moon's crust. Now, if this theory about the planet which we called Theia striking Earth is correct, then when they impacted, they would have mixed together. So the isotopes would be the same, wouldn't they? And there is evidence to suggest that the potassium isotopes taken from some of the Apollo rock samples are significantly different to that of Earth, which suggests a high energy event. The giant impact hypothesis really does add up.
So science is left in a quandary considering how the moon was created and how it arrived here.
But not really. Anyway, we get it. They don't think that the moon is formed naturally. So let's get on and move on to their explanation as to what the moon really is. It can't be that out there, can it?
In 1970, Michael Vassin and Alexander Sherbakov of the Soviet Academy of Sciences advanced a hypothesis that the moon was a spaceship built by extraterrestrials or possibly humans in the past.
Dare I ask for evidence for this?
The article, published in Sputnik magazine, was titled, "Is the Moon the Creation of Alien Intelligence?" Their theory relies on the idea that large lunar craters, which are thought to be created from meteor impact, are generally far too shallow and have flat or even convex bottoms.
Well, gravity limits the size of crater walls much as it does limit the size of mountains. Additionally, the larger impacts on the moon's surface would certainly have caused a lot of crustal melting, which means a flatter surface would have reformed in that crater.
The two scientists theorized that large meteors are drilling through the rocky layer and hitting an armored hull underneath the surface of the moon.
Another very compelling notion is the idea that the craters are not deep enough. We see these large mares, as they're called, these large seas, and if you look at the so-called man on the moon, you're looking at the moon when it's full, you see these dark areas, which some people stylize as a face. Those dark areas are actually not very deep compared to the rest of the moon.
Well, why would that be? They were literally formed by ancient volcanic activity. Lava literally poured out into those areas.
And what these Russian scientists who wrote a paper about the moon being hollow in the 1970s concluded was that the craters do not blast out enough material. It's as if they're hitting something really solid, and where you see these mares, you're actually getting much closer to the skin of this surface. So whatever hits it, it's bouncing off of something that's a lot more solid than the regolith, which is the moon dust on the surface. And it's actually causing these craters to be very wide and shallow. They don't have any depth.
Which I've already explained. Besides, throughout all of history and all of the images we've captured of the moon, we've never seen any sort of evidence whatsoever of this metal shell.
There were two Russian scientists saying that they believed that the moon was a constructed body.
Oh bloody hell, it's David Icke. Game over, people.
They thought that it was a planetoid that had been hollowed out, and everything that was going on, basically, apart from some stuff on the surface on the far side of the moon, is going on inside. What they were describing, long before it actually became fact in the Star Wars movies, was the Death Star. That's what they were describing in 1970.
Right, the Death Star. Well, I would say don't be too proud of this technological terror you've created. The ability to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the power of the Force.
And they reckoned that a very highly advanced race had hollowed out the moon, and therefore, because there's so many anomalies about the moon, it's unbelievable. Therefore, it can be explained why, as one NASA scientist said, the moon is inside out. What's on the surface of the moon should be inside.
What? What even?
Well, there's a number of anomalies on the moon's surface that suggest that it's hollow. First are the craters themselves. Some of them are hundreds of miles in diameter, which would mean that you would have a very deep crater.
In case you're wondering who this expert is, he's a ufologist.
But in fact, the crater is quite shallow, nowhere near deep enough. If you actually have an asteroid or comet of some sort impacting the moon, creating a 100-kilometer wide crater, you would expect the depth of that crater to go down 100 kilometers or more. But in fact, it only goes down much less than you would expect. I don't know the exact depth, but certainly enough that would make it very suspicious that beneath the moon's crust is a very hard exterior shell of some sort, some kind of metal that can withstand planetary impact by space debris, asteroids, and so forth.
You might be wondering why I keep mentioning who these people are. Well, it's basically to show you all that these experts are in actual fact not experts. And they are talking, for the most part, utter nonsense. And I'm going to leave it there today, because next month we're going to finish this video and come back to it. And let me tell you, it gets weirder. But for now, thank you all so much for watching. It truly is appreciated. If you enjoyed today's video, please do like and subscribe as well if the feeling takes you. I've been Simon Dan. Have yourselves a great week, and I'll see you all on Friday for the return of our old friend from Phuket. See you then.